Hey, this is Mr. Johnston. Today we're going to talk about our chromatic scale. This is when we take every note on our instrument between whatever range we decide to do, and we go one at a time through it. The reasons that we work on our chromatic scale generally include just getting used to playing every note on the instrument, and just like we talked about last time, with our scales being patterns that we have to get used to. Because they pop up in music all the time. The chromatic scale is also one of those patterns, and they'll pop up. So getting used to doing that with your hands is a good thing to get used to. So to visualize what a chromatic scale looks like, if you walk up to a piano or you look up a picture of a piano online, that you're gonna have a series of white notes and black notes. And so if you were to just start in one spot and just go up every single note in a row, that would be a chromatic scale. That's including every note, wherever you start, wherever you end up, including every note in between those two. So we're going to do that on the oboe. And for today, we're going to start on a note that we usually start on B flat. We're going to go from B flat to an upper B flat. So I'm going to just play it for you really quick, and then we'll talk our way through it. So that's our B flat chromatic scale going up. We can go down too, which we'll focus on a little bit later. So we're going to talk a little bit just about how to go from note to note, and then we'll talk about what this is going to look like when we see it written down. So first note, whenever we start and end a scale, the name of the scale is going to be the note we start and end on. So in this case, B flat. Remember, my hands are mirrored because of the video. So this up here, this is my left hand. We're going to have our first and second finger. And in the left hand, first finger in the right hand. So 1, 2, and 1. So that's our B flat. To go to B natural, which is our next note, you just have your first finger down. So you go from 3 fingers down, lift it in your right hand, lift that second one in your left hand, you just have this. So take a second, you can practice going from B flat to B natural, and B flat to B natural, and back and forth until you kind of get used to moving those 2 fingers at the same time. So try that on your own for a second, see if we're getting those sounds, see if we're getting those 2 fingers to move at the same time. If that's working out all right for you, then try adding the next one. So we go from B flat to B natural, lifting those 2 fingers up. Now we go to C, which if you were doing a B flat major scale with us, you already know, but going from this might feel a little bit different. So we go from B natural with the first finger down, and then we put the first finger in the right hand back down to get to C. If we want to go back to B natural, you just lift that finger back up in the right hand. So again, big thing with the chromatic scale is just making sure we're getting used to what it feels like to go from note to note, especially some of the ones we don't always do back and forth. So C, B natural to C, back to B natural, back to C. Maybe throw B flat in there, and then go to B natural, and then go to C. So here's a B flat to a B natural to a C right in a row. So there's your first 3. So every time I add a new one, I'm going to kind of get used to how that fits in with the pattern of all of them at the same time. So the next one, so we just ended at C. The next one is we add a bunch of fingers to. This is C sharp or D flat. A lot of these notes are going to have 2 names, and we'll talk about which name to use for what note as we get further through. For right now, we're going to call it C sharp. So we go from C, and then in your left hand up top, you're going to put all 3 fingers down, but you're going to slide that top finger down to show open the half hole. Then in the right hand, you're going to go 1, 2, 3. You're going to cover those. And then with the pinky, I'm going to get a little closer. With the pinky, you're going to put your right pinky in that little circular key in this set of 3. It's going to go in the middle one right there. So that's your C sharp. Your C sharp key's got everything pretty much covered except for that half hole up top. So, this is one that you're going to want to spend some time going back and forth between that C to that C sharp. There's a lot of things that have to happen there. So, just take a little bit, practice going back and forth. So we're going to practice going from B flat up to C sharp, just getting every note in a row that we know so far. Now, luckily, going from C sharp, C to C sharp, if we've got that covered already, going from C sharp to D, that's a lot easier. All you do to go from C sharp to D, you just lift that right pinky up, and boom, you already got your D. So, what we would do next, go back to B flat, play all the way up to D. We're gonna go on for now just to save time. So we did C sharp to D. Now D to E flat, which is something we do in our B flat major scale, so it might already be a motion that you're used to. Instead of putting our right pinky on that middle key, now we go to the bottom one. So again, you can just practice getting that pinky action going. Everything else up here, all this stays exactly the same. So here's D to E flat. Good. So now we have our E flat. To go to the next note, or E natural, we're going to lift that pinky back up. We're going to slide our half whole finger back up, and we're going to lift our third finger in our right hand. So we go from this to this. The one other thing that we have to add, if we want to keep going higher, but we cover our half hole, which we have to do once we get to E, we put our thumb down on the octave key right here. So we have one more note to add, then we're going to go back to B flat, and we're going to kind of review our way back up. So we just did E flat to E. For E to F, E natural to F, we're going to we have our fingering for E that we just played, and we're going to just add this mechanism right here. This key's right in between the second and third key in the right hand. And you just take your third finger, which would go down here, like when you're playing D, and you just move it up there. So. And as always, if I'm moving my finger a lot, it's just to make it easier for you to see where that motion is happening. You always want to keep your fingers nice and close to the instrument when you're changing fingerings. It's just a good habit to get into. Good. Now, at this point, what I generally do is I will go back to B flat, our first note, and kind of review going back up all the way to F. So let's review real quick. We're just going to go through the note names and fingerings real quick, and then we'll play it together. So we have start with our B flat, 1, 2, and 1. Then we lift everything except that top key to get B natural. What we do then to go to C is we put that first finger in the right hand down, so we have 1 and 1. Then remember to go to C sharp. We slide that first finger down, and then cover everything except that half hole, plus our right pinky, goes to that center key in this set of 3 down here. To go from C sharp to D, we just lift up that pinky. Everything else stays exactly the same. Now to go from D, I called it E flat before. That is one of the names for it, but since we're going up, I'm going to call it D sharp. We'll explain what the difference is there. So I misspoke before. I should have said D sharp the first time. I said E flat, so that's my bad. So to go from D to D sharp, we're going to put that bottom pinky key there. So everything else stays the same. That half hole still uncovered. To go from D to D sharp, we're going to put that bottom pinky key down. So now to go from from D sharp, I keep wanting to call it E flat. To go from D sharp up to E, we're going to cover that half hole back up, put our thumb down on the octave key, and then lift that pinky key back up. And we're going to lift that third finger in the right hand. So half hole gets covered, thumb goes down, pinky and third finger go up. And then the last thing we do to go to F is we are going to keep everything else the same. We're going to put that third finger on this key in between the second and third major keys that we have there. So take a second, kind of work your way back through. And what you can do, if you're in an environment you can't play, or if your face is tired because you've been practicing a bunch, you can just say the note names, work through the fingerings a couple of times. B flat, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F. You don't have to do that with me in the video. You can just kind of work on it on your own. So next step, we're gonna go back. We're gonna play each note at a time. So starting on our B flat. Let's try one more time. Just take a mental inventory. We're going to go a little slower this time. Ready? Cool. So double check with yourself, see how you did. If there are any issues that you ran into, maybe you got a fingering backwards, or you forgot to put, all fingers down or up that needed to go down or up. It's all good. You can just take a second, kind of take inventory of what you need to fix, and give it another shot. Cool. So we're at F. We're gonna keep going. So the next one that we have to go from F to F sharp is we lift this middle key, the F key right here, and we lift our middle finger in the right hand. So all that we have left is the octave key thumb, and 1, 2, 3, and the first finger in the right hand. So I would just practice going back and forth between F natural, just regular F to F sharp. I would just do that a couple of times. Yeah, you can just like chill out and just go back between F and F sharp. And then to go from F sharp to G, you just lift up that first finger in the right hand. So at this point, you go back to F, F to F sharp to G, then you've got 3 more notes to add. try it with me this time. Ready? Cool. Now, so we're at G. Our next note is going to be G sharp. So to go from here, this is going to look backwards, so I'm sorry if this is a little confusing. In the left hand, your left pinky should be next to this key. Generally, your pinky's just going to kind of chill out right around this key. You're going to press it down. This is our G sharp key. So otherwise the fingering is exactly the same. Your thumb is still down on the octave key. Still got your left hand covered, and you're just going to press that pinky key for G sharp. So I would definitely practice the motion between going from G to G sharp a couple of times. Now, to go from G sharp to A, you're going to lift that pinky key back up. You're going to, just like we talked about in our B flat major scale, going from just the octave key in the back, you're going to add this one on the side. So you don't press your finger down on it like this. You kind of use the side of your finger and just sort of lay it down on the key. So then you lift your pinky key up, you put that second octave key down, and then you lift the third finger in your left hand up, and what you're left with is the octave key and your regular fingering for A, just with some extra keys. So again, this is definitely one that you want to practice going from G sharp to A. Cool. So once you've done that, you've only got one more note that you got to add. You go from A, with the fingering we just had, you add your first finger in the right hand, and then now you got your high B flat. You want to use nice fast air as we're getting these higher notes. And I would practice going back between A and B flat, A and B flat. Cool. So at this point, I would go back to F. Before I would try and do the whole thing, use the chunk that we have. So let's review going from F up to B flat, and then we'll try and add the whole thing together. So going back to F, remember 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 is here, and then we just have the one octave key in the back. So we have F, F sharp, G, G sharp, the pinky right here, A, the side of our first finger touches down on that octave key, and B flat. Try that one more time with me. Just make sure you're saying the note names along it. There's something about saying it and doing it at the same time that helps reinforce it in your brain a little bit better. Go F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, and B flat. If we were to keep going, I would say you technically want to call it A sharp, but I'm not worried about it right now. We're calling it B flat chromatic, so we're going to call it B flat for right now. Cool. Let's try it. Go 1. Ready? Cool. Take inventory. See if there's anything you want to try and do a little bit differently this time. And let's do it one more time together. Right on F. Ready? Very cool. So what we would do next, we're going to go all the way back down to B flat. We're going to do this 2 ways. We're going to note name all the way up, and we're going to play all the way up. We'll probably do that once or twice. So thinking all the way back down to B flat, all the way back down to B flat. So let's note, name, finger together. Go, ready, and go. B flat, B natural, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, B flat. Cool. You might want to do that a couple of more times before you try and do it. There's no one way to practice this. Breaking it down into smaller chunks is good. Here we go. We're going to play the whole thing. And 1, 2, ready, and... Good. You want to use lots of air, especially as you're getting towards the top of the instrument, top of the scale. If you need to breathe, just breathe in between notes. It's not a huge deal right now where you take a breath. Try and see if you can at least get 5 notes in a row before you try and take a breath, though. Good. See what you can fix this time. If you need to make an edit, I'm gonna play it one more time. Good. So, this is a good spot where if you want to go back and try any of that going up. We just have a couple of minutes left here. So the next step that we would do with this is we would practice going back down. Now, what changes about this, and this is a point where if you put in chromatic scale and your instrument, so if I put chromatic scale oboe in Google or something like that and looked it up, you'd be able to see this. Every note has 2 names, and the reason for that, again, if we talk about going back to the piano, if you go up, especially if we're talking about black keys. So say I'm looking at A, and I want to go up to B. So A and B are both white keys, but there's a black key in the middle, and we could call that B flat. And when we're talking about band instruments, we generally will call it B flat. But if you notice, it goes between the two, that it can have 2 names. Because if we're going up, we would call it a sharp version of A, sharp meaning to make the note higher in pitch. Or we can think of it as a flat note taking B and making it lower. So that's why you can call them both that, because it is a sharper A or a flatter B flat, or a flatter B, and this note happens to go in between the two. That's why it can have 2 names. It sounds kind of confusing, but if you look at a piano and look at it that way, it makes a lot more sense. And again, if you just put in chromatic scale oboe, you can find a chart easily that'll show you exactly what we're talking about here. The next step that we would do is that we would do the same thing starting from that upper B flat and work our way back down. So we're going to just I'm going to note name my way through this. We'll talk about what notes will have different names real quick, and then we'll play through it. So we're going to start up at our B flat, having those 2 octave keys down. We'd go back down to A, lifting that first finger in the right hand. Now, instead of calling it G sharp like we did on the way up, since we're flatting the note, since we're going down, we would call it A flat. And again, that's with our pinky key right here. Then we go to G. Then we would, instead of calling it F sharp, putting the first finger down, we call it G flat, since we're lowering that G. Then we go to F. Now, this is the part, there are two spots on the piano that have two white keys next to each other. This will be one of those spots. We would go to E. Sometimes we'll see it called F flat, but it almost never happens. It doesn't happen very often, so we're just going to call it E for now. So F to E, and then E. I was calling it E flat before. You call it D sharp on your way up. Now we actually are going to call it E flat. So you got that half whole action going on again up here. And then we go from E flat to D. Then D to D flat, since we're lowering the D. D flat to C. Again, this is where we have two white keys next to each other. We call this a natural half step. Go C to B natural. And B to B flat. And that's the whole thing. So I'm going to play it going down from upper B flat down to lower B flat once. Awesome. So you want to practice that a bunch, just like we did with going up. Just for the sake of time on this video, I'm going to cut it here. But you can break that apart, sort of like we did on the way back up, to make it easier going down. And you could also, start the chromatic scale from other notes. It's not just a B flat chromatic. It could be a G chromatic. It could be an F chromatic. A chromatic scale is just about having a start and a stop point and getting every note in between included. So learning how to do the chromatic scale from all sorts of places is really important, but B flat's just a good place to start. So I hope something in this video was helpful. If you have any questions, we can feel free to pass it along. Feel free to go back and review parts of the video, and hope you're doing well, and I'll see you next time.